Good evening, everybody. So, tonight's topic is going to be what's an acceptable amount of work to leave behind at the end of your shift? I'm going to wait till some people start viewing. What's an acceptable amount of work to leave behind at the end of your shift? Now, like I said before, when I travel, mostly I travel through in nursing homes. And so in nursing homes, typically you have 3 shifts, a 7 to 3 shift, a 3 to 11 shift, and an 11 to 7 shift. Now, if you're a nurse like me, I'm the type of nurse that is enthusiastic about my job. I'm trying to get everything done in either my 8 hours or my 12 hours that I'm there. I really don't like leaving stuff behind for the next nurse, primarily because if I'm working a stretch, it's there the next day I come in. So I don't like leaving work behind, but that's me. Everybody is different. Everybody's time management skills are different. I'm one of these organized nurses, and I like to get it done in order the same way. And it doesn't matter what building I go in. I pretty much work the same. I have my same routine. Okay, so when we talk about acceptable amounts of work to leave behind at the end of your shift, so say you're a 7 to 3 nurse. My organization and my time management consists of, if I go in at 6:45, I'm going in for a 7A to 3P shift. Get there about 6:45. The night nurse should just be finishing up her med pass. You count the narcotics with her. Review your 24-hour report. You get report from her. Review your 24-hour report. You stock your cart. Say it's about 7:30, 8 o'clock about this time. This is a good time to start. You should be done with your med pass at 10. If you're like me, you're going to jump right on your treatments. Then 12, 1 o'clock meds. Then you start charting. Do your 24-hour report sheet. You might want to reorder some meds. To me, that take until about 1:30, almost 2 o'clock. It should, if your time management skills are good. And depending on the acuity of your patients as well. Okay. Say you get an admission around 1:30. I feel, personally, me as a nurse, and this is not written in stone, like I said, I operate under my own standards and whatever I feel like I must do as a nurse. If an admission comes into your building between the hours of 11 a.m. and 2, maybe no later than 2:30, sometimes some buildings say 2:15, that is that day shift admission. Although, if you must get anything done, I feel like what must be done and what cannot be passed on to the next shift would be your admission note, your skin assessment, wound measurements. Definitely put a wound treatment in place. If you have a wound on an admission and you're the receiving nurse, please put a dressing on it. If it's just a Band-Aid, because to leave it is just neglectful. Put a treatment in place. Verify the med list for the next nurse coming on, because it's hectic already. 3 to 11, you got to think about it. Sundowning is occurring with your patients. It's more of the behavioral shift. It's a busier shift. So it's just nursing courtesy, which I feel like we have gotten away from in this day and age. Used to be, you come on, if you were running late, a nurse would medicate a certain patient for you or help you out as far as your behavioral patients go. These days you come on and it's really chaotic on your 3 to 11 shift, So get that med list verified and fax to pharmacy. At least that's done. So you got your admission note done. You got your med list verified and it's written. And always, of course, put your diagnosis with each and every med. And after that, your wound measurements or whatever. So that would leave the 3 to 11 nurse to do her 8 assessments or however many assessments your building has, any clarifications of orders, and follow-up note, for that admission. Hey, April. Hey, Chastity. We some of us work with some nurses, and it's very frustrating because what we've lost in this field, I feel, is nursing compassion. And not only that, I'm talking about not compassion just for your patients, but compassion for each other. nurses tend to forget that we have somebody else that's waiting on us to come on shift. And we have certain expectations. Everybody has dealt with the nurse that comes in for her 3 to 11 shift. She does not have a smile on her face. Obviously, she's going through something and she has nothing nice to say. Sometimes you're reluctant to leave stuff over for that person because fear of them confronting you. Some people act like that. Some people give up that type of energy. Also, some of us has the nurse that, try and stay her whole, till 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, within your 3 to 11 shift to try and finish things. Oftentimes, some nurses do this consistently. So, those type nurses. It all boils down to time management as a nurse. If you have the proper time management, if you have a routine set, like I told you before, I'm a travel nurse. I can go into any nursing home and function like I function everywhere else. All I need to know is who's whole, who's crushed, who's my G2s, who's my behaviors. Because trust me, they're going to get medicated correctly. It's not a hard job, but it is a hard job. So, you really can't say that. My whole thing is, like I said, the courteous of nursing. To be a courteous nurse is to be that nurse that makes sure, your oncoming shift has water and ice for their med pass. Make sure they have insulin needles that are filled and lancets and, I forgot the other thing, alcohol swabs. That the 11 to 7 nurse is coming in and she has 7 tube feeders on the hall. Before your 3 to 11 shift is over with, set her up, set her up. It's not a big deal. Just be like, I know that you got these 2 feeders. I just brought everything out, and set up her syringes in front of her feedings and in front of her connection sets. How hard is it is what I'm saying. If we all take the time to just appreciate one another in this field, our jobs will be much easier. We have enough stress to deal with in different areas of our life than to come on a job and deal with. We already have to deal with people's attitudes. We all know what that's like. But if we are all conscious nurses and nurses that actually pay attention to what the other nurse needs are. Every nurse is not going to be a time management nurse. Every nurse is not going to be an organized nurse. But for those nurses, instead of downing them, why don't we lift them up by saying, hey, you forgot this such and such day. You've been having a problem, or you dealing with this today. When people are going through things, and sometimes it might be a stretch, but everything is not intentional all the time. Another thing I want to talk about is, okay, so you got your 11 to 7 nurse. 11 to 7 nurse primarily, most of the time they're on the shift by themselves. Their resources are limited. Like I always say, that nursing functions as a team. When things are left behind, especially for an 11 to 7 nurse, where there's limited resources, it makes it that much harder for her to do her job. I know, because I was one of those nurses for several years. It's very hard for you to do your job. 7 to 3 nurses, I feel like it's your responsibility to pretty much run your side of that shift every day, especially if you're that full-time nurse. You need to run that shift. You need to run that shift because you're primarily that nurse. Y'all go upstairs. I'm on the phone. Go upstairs. So you need to run that shift. As far as reordering your meds, if you think about it, if you are a full-time 7 to 3 nurse, number one, you know all the medications that your patients receive. You know when something is running low. Why don't you proactively get on the phone with pharmacy and follow through? And then when that 3 to 11 nurse comes on, if that's something of a concern, why don't you have her follow through? If you are all full-time nurses on that cart should not look a mess. And we already know what a mess looks like. We all know that our insulins need to be ordered every 28 days. It's things that we should do as nurses to improve the quality of care. Another thing I want to talk about when it comes to what to leave behind for a nurse. A lot of these nurses have kids. They have lives outside of the jobs, even though our jobs feel like we don't have lives outside of our jobs. They actually feel that way. You know, they'll call us in, 7 days straight if we allow it on some of these jobs because nursing is so short. But what I would like to say is, as a nurse, your character is built off of what type of nurse you are. Nursing, and I know in Virginia right now, I mean, when I was in Louisiana, it was small because I was traveling out there too. But in Virginia, to me, I've been from Charlottesville to North Carolina. So it's kind of like nursing community is very, very big, but it's very small when you start to travel throughout these cities in this state and you come in contact with different nurses. Eventually, you're going to work with those nurses again. And you don't want people to remember you as the nurse that always left stuff behind, a nurse that really didn't care, a nurse that was sloppy. Take pride in yourself, take pride in your job. Don't make the next person's job harder because you are slacking in your job. And it's evident in how your follow-up is, or it's evident in how you handle yourself on your job, period, with your patients. Because trust me, if you're full-time on a cart, you know what nurses are not giving their medication. Number one, let's keep it real now. Let's keep it real. We know what nurses is skipping on medications. We know what nurses is not giving scheduled narcotics. We know a lot of things. Go on there. We know all these things. But my whole thing is, if you are a smart nurse and understand how to approach these types of people, to let them know that somebody is watching, and then again, they still might not care. It's kind of like, how do you approach these people? It's kind of like that. How do you approach these people on your job? Okay. Now I got on nurses, but okay, we're going to talk about CNAs too, because I was there before. Like I said, I'm proud of my heritage. I was a CNA before I was a nurse. CNAs, if you a 7 to 3 CNA, you done got up your patients you needed to get up. First of all, we're going to go to 11 to 7 because everybody should have a get up list to a certain extent. Okay. You get up your restorative, people first. Then, you get up whatever people are on the get up list, which, 11 to 7 to me is never fair because they got the least amount of staff. But anyway, 7 to 3 comes in. They start getting their people up. Number one, and this is first and foremost, and I'm going to keep it real, like I said, a lot of these people don't even get soap and water on them. How do you get a patient up? I've seen it with my own self eyes, all 4 of them, I'm telling you. How do you get somebody up in the morning time and no soap and water is applied to them? Period. And they're a diapered patient. I mean, stuff like this goes on. I'm asking because you have to take pride in your job, no matter how small you think your job is. You have to. You have to. A CNA's job is the most important job, and I tell any nurse that on the floor. A CNA's job is most important because you all perform direct patient care. And like I said, it's been times where I've seen and called it out, people not even use soap and water on these people. So you don't use soap and water on these people, you getting them up any kind of way, brush their hair just to the back, it's a dignity issue at this point. And it's crazy. It's a dignity issue at this point. So like I said, you get there, you get your people up, you get them ready for breakfast, whoever's going to physical therapy. Now, as a CNA, the smartest thing for you to do in the morning time is, and your nurses will appreciate this, just a heads up, get your therapy people up first, your restorative people up first, because that way therapy don't bother the nurse. And that allows us to manage their pain. Because normally when they're going to therapy, for broken bones or to rehab a stroke. Still, those patients are in pain. Your nurse will appreciate you rolling those patients to their cart saying, here you go. He's about to go to therapy. Did you medicate him yet? That's just, and that, I'm telling you, your day will change just with that. Because what we fail to realize is typically your patients, when they're in pain and they experience that pain, their mood changes. So for you not to have a patient with behaviors, make sure they get medicated for their pain. And that's just, it's common sense to me, but it may not be common sense to a lot of other nurses. So CNAs, 7 to 3, getting your patients up, getting them ready for breakfast. Okay, I've seen some CNAs get their patient up at 8 o'clock in the morning and don't change them at all because they're in a wheelchair. They just changing their patients in the bed. We see you. We nurses, but we see you. We see you. We do. Now, if you're a nurse like me, you're going to call it out. Yo, hey, she been in bed. She been in that wheelchair, sitting in the activities, since breakfast time. What's going on? You got to call it like you see it. You can't be scared, because you know what? It's a lot of these, and I'm going to say little girls, because it is some little girls getting out here thinking that they don't have to be held accountable for the things that they do. A lot of people sensitive on their jobs now. Call it what it is. You neglectful. That's neglectful. Because I wouldn't want my mama to sit in a wheelchair from 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning in an activity room and not be changed. That's ridiculous. This is how bed sores occur. You know? CNAs. Okay. So I'm just going to say, this is just me being who I was at your job. I change them after breakfast. And this is with me, because see, I'm a common sense CNA, or I was. I'm going to use the sit to stand lift the whole entire time and roll them in and out the shower room. Like a assembly line by myself. I'm sorry. Here you go. Come on. Let me check you. Let me check you. That's a check. That's common sense. That's common sense. So that's your second round. At least second. That's 10, 11 o'clock. They eating lunch now. They might go for a little activity before lunch, play bingo, whatever. Okay. Now they eating lunch. Guess what happens after lunch? It's 1 o'clock. That's your last round right there. You made at least 3 rounds. And that's if you check them when you got them up. Because like I said, reality is it doesn't happen. But what I'm saying is your nurses aren't stupid to the fact. We know. Certain things might not get spoke on. But if I get too tired of something, I'm going to speak on it, and I don't have to get too tired of it to speak on it. Sometimes we just tend to not speak on it and do certain things ourselves. You know, we must all remember we got to go down that same road, and we don't know how quick it's going to be, how long it's going to be. But what I will say once again is when we know better, we do better. One love, y'all. I'm out. Have a good one. Thanks for the support.